Hey, Facebook and YouTube. I am Jared Sechel here with PragerU Live. Very excited to have with us today Professor and Dr. Gad Saad. He's a professor of marketing at Concordia University, an evolutionary behavioral scientist, and creator of the very popular YouTube channel, The Sad Truth. And Professor Saad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, real pleasure. I'm very excited to chat with you.
So, are you speaking to us from Canada today?
I am speaking to you from Montreal, indeed. The weather is starting to slowly turn from the dark winter.
Yeah, I in LA too, but in LA the weather turning just means the weather's exactly the same as it was every month before for the last million years probably.
Exactly.
So can you briefly tell our audience about your areas of expertise and your research?
Right. So I basically founded a discipline, which I coined evolutionary consumption, which seeks to bring in principles from evolutionary psychology and evolutionary biology to understand human behavior in general and consumer behavior in particular. And so to give you a more concrete explanation, most social scientists have defined themselves by their abdication of biology being relevant to understanding human behavior. They typically have argued that sure, biology matters when you want to explain the behavior of the salamander and the salmon and the hyena. But what makes us human, according to them, is that we transcend our biology. We are cultural animals. We are animals who are socialized. Biology is not relevant to us. And of course, that's silly. We are both a cultural and biological animal. So what I basically do is I take evolutionary principles and I demonstrate how when we are navigating the world as consumers, all of these evolutionary imprints manifest themselves in ways that is perfectly consistent with our evolutionary heritage.
Hmm. And it feels like that because you were talking about how social scientists have kind of, I'll say warped what biology means in terms of humans. And it feels like there's a small but growing body of college professors in North America, like you and Dr. Jordan Peterson, who are also big fans of, and we actually interviewed him a few weeks ago, who are really
Right.
sticking their necks out to support what we would really consider common sense and really classical liberal values and education. Do you think there are enough professors out there like you and like Dr. Peterson to really make a difference in the kind of crazy campus culture we've seen developing?
Regrettably, there aren't enough, but I can tell you that the movement is starting to grow. So if I only use the number of colleagues who might write to me privately saying, hey, I really admire what you're doing. I really support your work. Now, that's certainly not enough because you'd like them to come out publicly. You'd like them to join the fight. But definitely, I'm getting the sense that the zeitgeist is changing. I'm getting the sense that a greater number of professors are realizing that the fulcrum has simply swung too far towards the lunacy end. And so I'd like to think that through the work of myself and Dr. Peterson, other professors will be emboldened to join this battle, really for the soul of our universities.
Well, I've been sensing, I feel like maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago or even more recently, professors, outspoken non-left professors like you were, I feel like, more taboo a few years ago than they are now. And I'm wondering, do you think that sort of the explosion of social media and your ability to reach such a massive audience with your YouTube channel, has that made a difference in sort of making you more acceptable and mainstream, so to speak?
So I definitely think, of course, the media, the tools from social media help because it allows you to propagate your ideas in a way that is not prone to it being censored. But I also think there is a set of other realities that are specific to me that, in a sense, make my message more digestible. Number one, given my personal history, it makes it more difficult. And my personal identity, not that I wish to succumb to identity politics, but it makes it more difficult for people to dismiss me and to delegitimize me. So if I'm going to talk about issues in the Middle East that would have been taboo, well, if a white guy from Arkansas says the exact same thing as me, well, he's a racist bigot. If I say it, well, people pay attention more because I come from the Middle East. And also, I think I have a way, if I may say, of packaging my information such that it's never, I don't think, inflammatory. It's always reasoned. It's always, I mean, yes, sometimes I use satire and mockery, but I'm always standing on scientific evidence and on reason. So it makes it a lot more difficult for people to attack me. And so because of all of these various factors, I think my message has been so far well received.
When you're talking about Islam in the Middle East, for example, do critics of yours ever say, "Oh, well, you're Jewish, so that doesn't really count. You might as well be white."
Right. I mean, the Jewish stuff, I get it most when people say, I call it the but bruh, what about Israel, right? So that this is sort of a cognitive mindset whereby you're not allowed to criticize, phenomenon X unless you also somehow say, but Israel is also very evil. So the place where really my Judaism most comes into play is when people succumb to this. So, for example, if I criticize ISIS, then someone will come and say, yeah, I mean, I always notice that you criticize Islamic doctrines, but what about what the Israelis are doing to Palestinians, right? So,
Hmm.
this is really where my Jewish heritage comes into play among some of my detractors.
So I want to move to some very current events. A few days ago was Earth Day, and there were a bunch of so-called marches for science around the country. And you posted a photo on your Facebook page that people can go find. And one of the people at a rally, it's a photo of a sign that one of the people at a rally was holding, and the sign says, "We need to stop denying the existence of climate change, white privilege, male privilege, environmental racism, hetero privilege," and actually so many things that he actually had to cram them into the bottom of the sign and reduce the font size because there were so many things that we had to stop denying the
Right.
existence of. Does this sign's presence at a science rally kind of encapsulate to you what the left has done to the word science?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Because for those social justice warrior types, or as you call them, sort of the radical left, ideology trumps truth. Ideology trumps facts. If facts are politically incorrect, then you suppress them, you denigrate them. What matters is that my ideology du jour is the one that is protected. So, for example, if you do research on a sex difference, and if that research finds that women are superior on some task than men, then of course you publish it and you celebrate this as wonderful science. If, on the other hand, Darwin forbid, that research had found that men were superior, well, then in that case, this is perfect proof of the patriarchy and heteronormativity and the other bullshit terms, right? Therefore, what you end up having is an epistemological approach to the gathering of facts that is passed through the sieve of identity politics, of political correctness. And that's exactly what you don't do in science, right? Science is liberating because it offers a democratic epistemology for understanding the truth. And that's exactly what idiots like the guy who put up the sign is violating, because he is driven by his ideological bents rather than by his commitment to truth.
Well, it's what our one of the favorite sayings of our founder Dennis Prager is, first tell the truth and then give your opinion. And for science, it's supposed to be first find the facts and then you can kind of say what's real. But for the guy holding that sign and for the left in general, it's first tell our narrative and then kind of fit the facts into it.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And I had a chat a while ago with someone who had invited me on his show, where he asked me, "Look, in your scientific work, is there anything that you're not willing to tackle because it might be sort of taboo to do so?" Well, just asking that question, in a sense, is an affront to science, right? Anything should be approachable, should be able to be tackled, as long as you do it with the honesty of the scientific method, right? So if I find that race A is superior to race B, let the chips fall where they may. If I find that women are superior to men on some phenomenon, let the chips fall where they may. We can't allow political correctness, identity politics, and all the other nonsense dictate what is permissible for us to talk about and research and what is not. That's what North Korea is.
You've written before, and I'll preface this by saying this is the opposite. This doesn't not apply to you or any of the other brave souls on college campuses who speak out for the truth, but it does apply to many people who don't speak out for the truth and are kind of cowed by the left's intimidation. You've written before that cowardice is one of the ugliest human traits, and that you believe the West isn't affected with it, but that the tides may be turning. Can you explain what you mean?
There's the seven deadly sins, which most people know, and at the apex of that is pride, which is self-love, from which all the other deadly sins flow. I've always said that we need to add cowardice as another deadly sin, because I mean, the way you truly define the backbone of an individual, their true worth, is when they have to stand up and have the courage to face something that otherwise might have negative repercussions on themselves, right? If all I need to do to demonstrate that I'm a good guy is to change my bio profile to the French national flag when Paris is attacked by terrorists,
Wait,
well, everybody,
that's not enough.
apparently that's not enough. Yes. So then everybody could do that. So that's in biological terms, this would be called a non-costly signal, right? Because the signal is easily imitated by anybody who wishes to demonstrate their virtue signaling. There has to be a costly signal for it to be a meaningful one. So if I stand up and go against all of the academic orthodoxy and taking the positions that I do, if I stand up and then attract death threats upon me because I criticize Islam, well, it can't be much more of a costly signal than that. The reality, though, is that most people are incredibly cowardly when it comes to tackling even the most mundane of issues because they don't want to be noticed. They don't want to not be invited to their favorite espresso bar. They don't want their friends to ostracize them in case they might not like Hillary Clinton. And so for all sorts of reasons, people end up being quiet because they don't want to draw any attention to them to a position that might not be sort of the orthodox accepted position. That is the cancer that is currently infecting the West, right? If more people had the testicular fortitude to stand up and say, look, here's the reason why I might have preferred Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton. And no, that doesn't make me a Nazi bigot for having done so. And I know professors who thought that way, but who were deathly afraid of stating so, because imagine saying that you might have actually preferred Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton. You're basically out of all the parties in academia. And so what I try to implore my colleagues is, look, always speak politely, always speak with reason, but speak your mind. I come from an area where we didn't have the luxury to speak our mind. So I know what it is that we would lose if we don't defend our freedoms every single day.
And for everyone watching, Professor Saad came from Lebanon. So I think you're absolutely right. People want to feel like heroes, but they don't actually want to do anything that puts them at risk, which is kind of, you can't be a hero if you're not putting yourself at risk. It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly right. There you go.
For the benefit of our American viewers watching this, can you catch us up on how Canada is doing under the leadership of Justin Trudeau? We were big fans of Prime Minister Stephen Harper, but I want to get your thoughts on Trudeau.
Then clearly you are part of the neo-Nazi party, because only neo-Nazis could have in any way supported anything that Harper said. By the way, it sounds as though I'm being satirical and facetious, and I am a bit, but actually that is very much the discourse that you heard. I mean, you just have to go on my private Facebook page, and, you know, just the kind of lunacy that people would say about Harper, it literally is as though he was indistinguishable from Hitler, right? I mean, it's breathtaking. But in any case, I can't speak to, you know, how the economy has changed in the last 6 months since he's come into power. But what I could tell you is that the zeitgeist of Canada is now sort of social justice warrior central, right? So Justin Trudeau is trying his hardest to move us as close to as quickly as possible to being Sweden as he can. And so, you know, gender parity across all appointments, right? So the individual merits of people are no longer relevant. We need to make sure to have one quadriplegic, transphobic, non-cis, whatever the terms are, on the cabinet. And we need to, right? He's passing bills and motions that are unbelievably problematic. So, for example, motion M103, which places Islamophobia as a central thing that we have to fight in Canada. You know, that problem that doesn't exist in Canada. There is, I think, maybe we might talk about Bill C-16. Are we going to talk about that?
Yes, we will.
So maybe I could segue to that. So Bill C-16 is a bill that is now going through the process, and I'll be appearing in Parliament to offer my testimony, that has incorporated gender expression and gender identity as groups that could be prone to hate, and therefore they need special protection. So, for example, the whole Jordan Peterson stuff of him not wanting to address people based on these made-up gender pronouns could be considered hateful under this bill. I discussed a case that just came up at Harvard where their LGBT group basically said that your gender can change from day to day. So, for example, if I were to, at the start of my class, poll 100 students about their gender identity, I would have to do that pretty much every 14 nanoseconds, because how do I know that now you identify as male, but then later you'll identify as female. Maybe tomorrow you'll be a non-binary. The next day you'll be a pan, whatever. And so it's become a burlesque, satire of lunacy. And this is all being shaped by the platitudes of Justin Trudeau, who is really, the castrato in chief, who believes in all of these types of so-called progressive ideas. And so Canada's not doing well, and I hope that we get rid of him soon.
It's kind of a sick irony because I feel like Americans always kind of just joke about Canada and assume it's always been kind of this social justice, kind of like, leftist haven. But the way you say it, it's going into overdrive now. And under Harper, it wasn't this way.
Well, absolutely, and in a sense, Harper preceded Trump, right? I mean, the Brexit and the Trump, and maybe earlier the Harper. We would have liked to think that those were all part of one sort of common awakening of people who have had enough of this lunacy. But I guess regrettably, the good things that we had with Harper are quickly being undone by Justin Trudeau. So let's see what happens.
Well, I hope South Park takes advantage of making fun of Canada in their next season. It's I kind of wonder, is Justin Trudeau going to extend the million gender idea to things like driver's licenses and passports and security? If someone, I could see it being a very serious issue for police who are searching for a suspect. What do they say? Are they going to say it's a male? Or are they going to have to say something else in Canada?
Well, it's so funny that you're saying this, because I think I'm thinking about preparing a new sad truth clip where I address exactly this point. So one of the sort of lofty goals of the progressive government of Justin Trudeau is to turn Canada into a gender neutral, a gender free zone, right? So that you no longer have to express on your passport or in any identifiable document your gender, because what if I don't have a gender? I'm a non-gendered person. So the most basic biological category by which children navigate through the world, right? They come into the world, and very quickly they start attributing things as being part of male or female. So this is a very innate mechanism of categorization. Canada is seeking to eradicate that. Now, by the way, I should point out that the positions that I'm espousing here don't in any way imply that I don't recognize the fact that these individuals exist, right? Transgendered people exist, and they deserve all of the dignity that is afforded to anybody else and all of the protections. That doesn't mean, though, that we eradicate gender from our parlance because we don't want to offend the 1 out of 10,000 people who might be offended by this issue, right? So that's what I can't remember who coined that term, but that's the tyranny of the minority, right? You could be transgendered, and we should afford you all of the rights that are allowable under the law, but I don't have to cater to you. I still would like to identify my children as male and female, and I still would like to identify myself as male married to a female. By the way, can I mention one other thing about
Sure.
marriage?
Yeah.
I'm going to be posting a sad truth clip shortly where I describe this incredible article that just came out in Truth Revolt that basically looked at this new phenomenon called cis sexism, right? So this is a new form of transphobia. And here's basically what it argues. So when I am now married my wife, who is a woman, because I'm heterosexual, therefore I like to mate with women that have female genitalia, that turns out to be a form of transphobia because there are women who actually come in the bodies of men. So by my restricting my wanting to only mate with women that don't have penises, that's cis sexism. So apparently it turns out that my whole marriage was nothing more but ugly bigotry.
Wow, someone should let your wife know about that.
I'm going to break the news to her shortly after we finish.
Okay, good. Well, it's kind of like a play on the words of the saying something like better to let 100 criminals go free than arrest one innocent person. I feel like the left's philosophy when it comes to offending people is better to lie and not let one person be offended than tell the truth to 100 million people and offend one person.
Gorgeous analogy. That's exactly their ethos. You're exactly right.
Unless it's a white guy, you can offend the white guy. That's fine.
That is true.
Okay, final question, Professor. Sure. You're an expert in the science of evolution. You've also said, tongue-in-cheek, in reference to Islam and Islamism, that you support Darwin but reject Darwinism. What core, you were joking, but what core point were you getting at?
Well, I was basically satirizing the fact that if you add the ism to Islam, it doesn't somehow make it magically into something that's different. Islamism is most of Islam, right? Islam has a spiritual element. That's the part that nobody should have a problem with. But much of Islam is political, right? Islam is a supremacist ideology, right? The world will be at peace and one when everybody is united under the flag of Allah, right? So much of Islam is nothing but Islamism. But what happens, and here I'm going to be charitable, a lot of people who find it infeasible to directly criticize Islam then create this make-believe unicorn sort of separate variant called Islamism, because then they're allowed to criticize Islamism, which is different from Islam. But Islamism is simply the political implementation of what's in Islam. It doesn't exist in a separate set of books. And so what I was satirizing there is, I believe in Darwin, but not Darwinism. That's evil. I believe in capital, but capitalism is evil. So if you just add magically the suffix ISM, it turns it into a nasty variant. It's bullshit.
So when it comes to, have you spoken with Dr. Zuhdi Jasser before?
Oh, yeah. I have not, because he's one of the grand muftis of unicorn Islam. Unicorn Islam is a term that I coined that refers to anyone who creates his own mythical version of Islam that is otherwise perfectly disconnected from the doctrines of Islam. And so I tried, I think, to maybe engage him once or twice. I can't even remember. I might have even written him an email once. But as you might expect, I did not hear back from him. By the way, I always never hear back from the Grand Muftis of Reform and Unicorn Islam, because they know that I'm not really the guy that they'd want to be engaging with, because then I might call them on their BS.
Well, that would be a fascinating debate between you two. And in all honesty, we've done several videos on Islam. We did one with Ayan Hirsi Ali, we've done with Karam Dara. And our position has been that there needs to be a reformation internally. There are over 1 billion Muslims worldwide, and if the religion needs to be fundamentally transformed in order to make it compatible with the billions of other peaceful people on the world, the only way it will happen, at least that we believe, will be an internal reformation, possibly pushed and pressured from the outside, though.
Well, I would say that if the Reformation is going to happen, it would have to happen not in a piecemeal fashion, where you take each little syllable in the Quran or the Hadith or the Sirah and try to reinterpret it so that you come up to a more gentle version. That's not going to work. That's completely useless. You're going to have to magically come up with some grand abrogation, right? Are you familiar with the concept of abrogation? Do you know what that is?
I've heard of it, yes.
So abrogation is basically, in Islam, you've got the Meccan period, which was the peaceful period, and then you got the Medinan period, where all the violent passages were there. Any passage that contradicts one another, then the later passage abrogates, nullifies the earlier one. So if in the earlier passage I say treat everybody nicely, and in the later passage I say kill everybody who's not a Muslim, then that passage abrogates the earlier one. So if you're going to have a reformation, you're simply going to have to uncover a new revelation that abrogates magically all of the problematic parts. You're not going to be able to do it by sitting there for another 200 years trying to reinterpret what kill, 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 kill might mean. It might mean kill with caresses, right? So this kind of nonsensical approach to reform, it's not as though people haven't thought about doing it for the past 1400 years, but it failed. And so there's no reason to expect that the latest grand muftis of reform are going to be successful where 1400 years of previous people have failed, right? And so my perspective is perhaps more pessimistic than yours, and that is that I think that any genuine doctrinal reform will ultimately fail.
Well, I, for one, would love to be killed with caresses. And on that note, Professor, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to do this again.
Anytime.
And for everyone watching, please share this, send it to your friends, send it to any college students in particular. Thank you, and watch us again.
My pleasure. Cheers.